Hey everyone. It's
Hey,
we got a little bit of technical difficulty here. Nick is down and out for the moment. He's having microphone issues, so you got to put up with Cameron and I for a minute here. We'll try not to be a snooze fest, but yeah, Cameron, what are we talking about today?
we are talking about common mistakes that none of us have made ever.
Nah, nah, we'll help you out, but this doesn't apply to us.
Not that we've ever come close to making any of these. There's a lot to talk about here. If you guys in the chat, we know you've made mistakes too. If you're in the DIY niche, so go ahead and tell us what mistakes you've made. See if we share any commonalities here.
That's a really good point because I think we have a lot of experts and a lot of newbies our in our podcast here, and so sharing that information without being embarrassed about it is really helpful to others. I think. Um, I mean, I think some of the things we'll talk about tonight, everyone who has experienced has done.
Testing,
Yeah,
testing.
Definitely.
Oh, working.
Oh, hey Nick, we have you. Maybe no video.
yeah. Everyone started somewhere, right? Even the best, most accomplished speaker builders. Surely they started somewhere and they made some mistakes along the way. I see some of them make mistakes to this day. So
Yeah, absolutely. There's some people who are highly praised and I'm sure deliver a good product, but I think to myself, that's not, at least in my opinion, isn't the way to do it. And they repeat that mistake. And, some of these things you can get by, but yeah. Um,
stacking coils and crossovers. That's a big one. That's a
yeah.
really common one.
Yeah. So assorted rubbish is talking about, it's
Love the
talking
name.
about when you have inductors, if you place them too closely together, they can actually influence each other. And Nick, you're screwing us up here, Nick.
We heard something. He'll figure it
Yeah,
out.
if you
Stick
if
with
you
us.
I
if
thought
you
I
put it,
mute. I thought I thought I muted my audio. Sorry, I did not.
oh, okay,
Obviously,
you're very distorted, but maybe your internet's just catching up. So
Yeah, coil crosstalk. Tell us what that's about, Ryan.
yeah, it basically um, there's a field, and if you coil up a wire and put electricity through it, there's a field, just like an alternator in a car. Um, and there's other examples of this. Your wireless charger for your phone is basically a coil of wire with electricity going through it, and then that can uh, create a magnetic field or electrical field. And so, if you have inductors spaced closely together, that field, which is invisible, will pass on to the other, and it'll influence the other. And I can't remember if it drifts the values. I can't remember if it goes up or down or whatever, but it can screw with the values of your inductors. So that's
Yep.
definitely a common one because when you're new to crossover building, you kind of just put all the components on a board and you don't pay attention to that. And to save space, you might slap them together.
Yeah. If you're
and
curious
there is
whether or not,
Yeah, we can hear you, Nick, but it's choppy and was very harsh.
right now.
go ahead, talk again.
Yeah, we can hear you.
How about now?
Yeah,
Yeah,
that sounds
that's
good.
good.
That sounds good. We're an audio
Okay.
podcast and
Um,
we have audio.
Boom.
you know, yeah, I don't know what was going on. I actually think it has something to do with. It doesn't matter. Anyway, back to the point that we were talking about. So um with the inductors, just
He's
You know what,
gone.
Nick? Get your stuff together there, and then I think we got the inductors thing covered. Um,
Yeah, someone says someone says using excessively heavy gauge wires for short runs from 20 watts per channel amp. I don't know if that's a problem per se, but it's definitely could be overkill.
it's wasteful.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got to think of it like the re if you want to calculate resistance. I can't remember how it. I can't remember the exact formula off the top of my head, but it's something times length.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you have like 1 inch, I work in meters. So if you have like 0.01 meters, that resistance is going to be incredibly small. But if you have 300 meters, that resistance is going to be incredibly big because it's times length. So if you're just running wire from your terminal cup on your speaker to the driver or your crossover to the driver, that's a very short distance, and you don't have to really worry about resistance in that length of wire.
Yeah. Yeah. I say, I mean, use anything from like down to 16 gauge for speaker runs, unless you're doing some kind of pro audio application and you've got hundreds of feet or, 100 feet, something like that. Don't worry about the resistance like that. No need for really heavy gauge wire.
Yeah.
Get back to coil crosstalk. If you've got any question about your inductor layout, go ahead and post it on a forum and someone will let you know within about 30 seconds. It's like the
Good
most,
point.
it's the most common thing on crossovers. Someone will post a beautiful crossover with perfectly reasonable spacing and there'll be 100 comments. Yeah, those are too close together.
You can, I happen to have a prop here. This is totally unplanned, but here's a couple of washers, and you can imagine these are inductor coils. You can imagine sticking a pencil or something through that inductor, through the coil. You don't want that to point at any other inductors. So the worst would be if these two inductors were like this, they'd be pointing at each other. But perhaps they were like this, it's going to miss the other one. So that's a good start, and definitely space. When it comes to electrical currents and things like that, or like magnetism, I should say, distance is your friend. It's to the power of 2. So the further away, the more that field is going to drop off.
And the fields aren't really huge in crossover parts. So a few inches is generally a good rule of thumb. You're going to be just fine. If there is any interference at those distances, it's going to be immeasurable.
Oh,
We might have Nick back.
Yeah, I don't know.
yeah,
Possible.
yeah, we can hear you. Cameron dropped out for a second there, and now you're in. Yeah.
So you guys were talking about inductor layout. The biggest thing is knowing not only how to space your inductors, but how to position them. I'm not sure if we talked about the positioning as far as like positioning, one down and one up. And a lot of people get confused with iron core inductors because a lot of times they show these inductor layouts with air core and they get confused that an iron core layout is basically an air core standing, on its side going around the iron. So that can be very confusing as far as where do you want your next inductor. But I would tell people, for me, for inductor layout, the best thing that I would say is if you're building a speaker of any kind, I don't care. Me and Cameron were just talking about this. Separate the crossover boards. There's really no reason on a DIY speaker why you need one crossover board. In fact, I think it's very beneficial if you're doing DIY speakers to have a separate tweeter and woofer crossover board, or if you're doing a 3-way tweeter, mid-range woofer crossover board. Because if anything ever happens, it's very easy for you to get in there and figure out with that particular woofer, mid-range, what's going on with it versus having to test all the circuit, where a lot more could go wrong, especially if it's like a grounding issue or something of that nature.
Yeah, I hard agree with you on that. And I've been guilty in the past of like 90% of the time, I'll just jam all of my pieces onto one board. We recently went through heck trying to troubleshoot, and I probably won't do a single board crossover unless it's something really simple in the future. For that reason, troubleshooting is just so much easier.
And the main reason that, other people do this is it saves them money, right? Like if you're a manufacturer, it saves you money to put it all on one board. But DIY speakers, that's not really going to be an issue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What else, gents? What's on your mind?
I got a list, but I just
Me
wanna,
too.
just want to bang out a few questions here. Bobby says, "What if I just measured them after and made the adjustments?" I wouldn't bother. That just seems like more work. Just space them out appropriately. But yeah, and I don't know. Like it just seems wrong to mess with them like that. And then 29 gave me a thank you. You're welcome. I'm happy to hear you're into speaker building. You have some nice stuff there, beryllium tweeter and stuff. Do metal foil caps sound better? I have never been able to hear a difference with the super nice caps and stuff. I buy the cheap stuff personally. So I don't know if there's anything else there you guys want to take on.
Yeah, I just wanted to say hi to Windy City Smokers. If you guys are into it, he does really cool. He has his own little Instagram, well, not Instagram, Etsy, I think, Etsy page, where he builds smokers to smoke like your alcohol.
Oh,
And so anyone that's into that, you can check it out. I think he's a friend of mine. He loves doing that. But he started getting into even that. He got his own little CNC because of speaker
oh,
building.
cool. Smoking alcohol. That's crazy.
Yeah.
What a niche.
Yeah.
Cool.
It is a niche. Fucking on a niche podcast.
What else, guys?
So I have one.
Go for it.
And I think we've all done this in some way, shape, or form. How about relying too much on manufacturers' data?
Oh yeah, yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, because to buy all the microphones and everything when you're starting out, I did it. I remember Jeff Bagby had like a trace software or something.
Yeah.
Maybe it wasn't him. Yeah,
Oh yeah, like FPT
Yeah,
trace.
that's still around.
and you could
FP graph
trace
trace.
the manufacturer's thing and then run it through a baffle step thing, and man, I don't know. Like it technically works, but yeah, good point, Nick.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think when you very first start, you don't realize, and we've talked about this a lot, as the offset between the tweeter and the woofer. What the time difference between when sound goes out of the tweeter and sound goes out of the woofer, and how that affects phasing, especially in the crossover region, but actually through all the regions, but especially in the crossover region. So if you take manufacturer's data, for example, Parts Express still gives FRD and ZMA files, and I still think it's a good idea. Like if you're learning crossover design, to download those FRD and ZMA datas just for like, hey, just to work on crossover designs, not as like, hey, this is going to work in the end for this speaker. Those are two different things. But if you want to be like, hey, I want to practice, but I don't necessarily want to buy a bunch of drivers and stuff, you could practice designing
Yeah,
crossovers using those FRD and ZMA files. However, don't expect when you're done with those FRD and ZMA files, if you were to put them in the box for that crossword to work, 'cause it will not work as you think it is in the program.
Yeah, that's true. Big time.
I would say if you are like eager to try your hand at speaker building and you don't want to buy all the bells and whistles, buy cheap drivers, do the FPT trace thing, put them in a box and everything. Just don't expect amazing results and see what you get. I mean, oh, let's see if I can turn up my microphone. Thanks for that. Keep going.
Yeah, I was trying to turn it up in here, but it doesn't look like it's
Okay,
working.
let me give it a try. Keep going.
Yep. I noticed that as well. So thank you, Thustad, for telling us that he's quiet. He's quiet on my end as well.
Yeah, on the
DAS V3 is the greatest tool. Okay.
no, I agree. DATS V3 is probably one of the most powerful tools there is. You guys hear more noise? Here he goes.
Is that a little better?
You're good.
Okay.
That's just a tad lower and you're perfect.
Oh, lower? Okay.
Just a tad. Not by much. Like maybe 3 decibels. FPT, yeah, is linked on the forum. Yeah, I think it still works. FP, like those, there's nothing wrong with those, but you just have to remember, and we've talked about this before, that in general, those are going to be on some type of like infinite baffle design. So you're not taking into account what the baffle is going to affect the sound. So if you didn't watch our last one, as far as placement of drivers, you should definitely watch that last episode because that talks about that in great detail, much greater detail than we're going to go into right now. And it's not taking into account things like baffle step compensation circuit. I've seen a lot of people take the manufacturer's graphs, especially on like a woofer or a mid woofer, and they're making like a 2 or 3 way, and they have no baffle step compensation at all in it because they just have it looking flat. And it looks really good because they're using the manufacturer's response. But if you were to put that in an actual box and rely just on that, then you're not going to have any bass out of that speaker. Your bass is going to be 3 to 6 decibels lower, depending on where it is. It's not going to sound nearly as good as you thought it would be.
Yep. Yep. This leads almost directly into another topic that I've got: pre-built crossovers.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Common mistake.
Big time.
Yeah. Kind of just a waste of money, actually.
So 29 is true. 3 decibels is not a little toy. It's double the power. You know what I mean? Yes.
That's true.
Good.
But 3 decibels is a little. And Impulse, and what we're talking about, and Impulse Audio knew what I meant.
He got you though. Yeah.
He did. Yeah, it's true.
Someone else asked if we can see their comments. Yes, we can see your comments. Just we can't answer them all. We're not ignoring anyone necessarily. It just, there's a lot flying up and trying to stay on topic too. So just be aware of that. We're not jerks.
And there's a lot of things that we have to, yeah, we have a lot of things that we want to talk about. But we will say this: we do this every time. If you have a comment that absolutely has to be answered, we do stop for any super chats, just because we know that you're thanking us, and we want to make sure to also be able to thank you as well. And I apologize about the beginning having a little bit of technical difficulties, but I'm glad that we're all here now. Cameron, I think you had something you wanted to talk about. Is that right?
I'd mentioned
Did you say?
pre-built crossovers.
Yeah.
That kind of linked into our last
yes.
discussion about using the manufacturer's files and the errors that go in there. Using pre-built crossovers, another way we could say this is just using textbook off-the-shelf crossover values. Both of those have the same issues, and that's kind of what a pre-built crossover is textbook values just actualized onto a board. And the mistakes that are made assuming that your driver is going to behave the way it is when you put it on that crossover.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's so.
Yeah, we should really mention, what are pre-built crossovers actually designed for?
Nothing I can think of. I mean, okay, perfect pistonic drivers with a perfect impedance curve, maybe.
Or maybe PA drivers were really, or car audio drivers sometimes. I got curious about car audio drivers, and because they always have a crossover on them, right? And I'm like, are they going to be in phase? Are they not? And I had a feeling what it was going to be, and my feeling, at least on all the ones I've tested, has been correct so far, and that they have been designed for one thing and one thing only, and that's protection.
Yeah.
They do protect,
and like it'll protect the drivers, yeah, but that's about it.
Yeah.
If you're concerned, and so the reason why we're talking about these pre-built crossovers, most people think impedance is a straight line. So if we have a 4 ohm driver, straight line 4 ohm impedance, that's not what the impedance looks like, right?
No, absolutely not.
No, it's usually a big.
Talking to you guys.
So I'm off in comment land. What's up? No, it's not.
So when it says like a 2500 hertz at 4 ohm, we don't even know if it's really necessarily crossing over even at 2500 hertz. It could be crossing a little bit over, it could be under, it could be, there's a lot of variables that go into that crossover point. So there's no way for us to look at that and say, oh, this is going to work perfectly for this driver or this driver, not to mention your cabinet makes a difference. There's so many things that can make a difference when we're designing the crossover that it's very hard to have anything other than protection when you're buying a pre-built crossover.
Yeah, I agree. I think they're a total waste of time.
Yeah, there's no baffle step compensation.
All right.
And there's no attenuation for your tweeter, just a couple filters.
So I think, while we're on this topic, I think sometime we should do a build off where we have to use a pre-built.
Why?
I knew you were going to say that. I think it's honestly a really cool idea,
because you can do it. You can get one to work. The question is like how good. And I would be very curious. Like it would be harder, I think, to design around a pre-built crossover than it would be to design with a regular with your own.
Yeah,
crossover.
because you have no control over it, and it's just going to turn out like garbage. But
no, I don't think
it's all going to come down to driver selection. That's what it is.
And we'd have to do all the things that
Ryan hates. Yeah, it'll be like 2.5 way. It'll be
and then it'll have like we'll have to offset it physically, to get it in phase.
There's no chance of it working.
So I have one on my list that is very similar to that, and it's active crossovers. I put a video together a
Oh,
long time ago, and I've brought it up on this podcast before, and I get a lot of thumbs down on that video and a lot of comments because I think I triggered a lot of newcomers, and I think also some people didn't quite understand the point of the video. But I think a lot of newbies, they read enough to know, oh, you have to design a crossover. But then they fall into this trap that, oh, I can buy this mini DSP and just plug in the stuff and impedance won't affect it. So I can just plug in Linkwitz Riley fourth order at 2500 hertz or whatever, and away I go. And they'll read a lot about how active crossovers are better, which they have many advantages. And so they fall into this trap without actually measuring, without actually designing the active crossover. And so this was on my list because I see it a lot. It costs a lot to do, and the results are not what they think it is. You still need to measure. I proved it on my channel on that video, even if many people didn't take the time to read it and or watch it and understand what I was saying. But yes, if you're a newcomer out there and you're thinking, well, I can bypass a lot of these issues by using an active crossover, think again. They can eliminate a lot of hassle, but you still have to measure and understand what the drivers are doing in the acoustic world, not just the electrical world.
so it's really funny that you say that. I shortened some of our discussion last week into a video, and some of you guys that are watching might have watched that, and it was about the tweeter placement. And I think the name of the video is why you should not offset your tweeter.
Oh,
And I got a bunch of people giving it thumbs down that didn't watch the video. And you know why? Because they read it as you should not offset the tweeter, which is not what I said. I said why you shouldn't offset your tweeter, which is what we
yeah,
talked
there's a
about.
reason to not
Maybe
do
you
it.
should, maybe you shouldn't. Right. There maybe you should, but you have to understand the reasons why you're doing it to understand why maybe you should or should not do it. And so that's the same thing. A lot of people get very triggered very fast on things that they like. But the question, you think this is a really interesting question. And Benjamin, I want to get to yours later too if we get a chance. But Assorted Rubbish said on the topic of crossovers being designed for constant load. In real life, it's not constant load, which we just talked about. He uses Zobel circuits to fix, which is a way of fixing your impedance. My question is this: do you care as much about impedance anymore with the way amplifiers are now designed?
No, I think Zobels are a waste of time. Put them on my hate list. They fix the problem of a flat impedance profile to use a pre-made crossover, but there's still problems with pre-made crossovers. It's not just the impedance. It might be the biggest thing, but you still have your frequency response is a mess. It's not a flat line. Phase, okay? So when you add
Phase, yeah.
the drivers probably aren't in phase to begin with, but then when you start adding poles to your crossover design, you're going to rotate that phase even further. So it just flattening the impedance curve doesn't fix that problem. And flattening the impedance curve for other purposes like amplifiers and things, I don't see the benefit there either.
Yeah, it could complicate things more than needed, especially with modern amplifiers. Ryan, the topic you mentioned, not just measurements, but even EQ within DSP changes the phase of the signal.
Yes.
Actually, yeah. So just because it's all done in the digital domain doesn't mean, or it can be done in the digital domain, doesn't mean it won't actually change the phase. So there's so many things that you need to be measuring for. Even if you have a really good idea of how these drivers behave, you have to measure to make sure you're getting the result that you expected.
I've said,
Yeah, and if you are,
yeah, let me just slip this in. I've said it before on here before, but frequency response, phase, speed of sound, distance, all these things are very intertwined. There's probably a couple more in there. So you can't just take one and separate it from the other. They're all intertwined. Time, distance, phase, all that stuff, very linked.
True.
I was going to say, if you guys want to know a little bit more about this with DSP, I did do a video on there talking about different types of phasing that you can do to flatten out your response. And in particular, I talk about a linear phase, which you can use in a DSP. I show you how to do it. I show you what program to use. So if you're interested in getting a really nice phase profile after you're building, take a look at it. It'll really flatten out your frequency response by adjusting phase.
Yep. Yep.
If you're doing DSP.
Yeah, you
That's
need DSP to
active DSP. And one thing that a lot of people don't realize with DSP, I want to mention this. All DSP is not the same.
no.
Which really this should be like a DSP. So I'm going to talk about one part of the DSP not being the same. One part of the DSP not being the same is taps. You have so many taps, which are, just think of them as corrections, all right, for simplicity's sake. Cheaper DSPs like Dayton Audio, for example, not saying anything bad about Dayton Audio boards, are going to have very few taps. I think it's like 500 or 700 total. And doing something like linear phase on it takes all of them. I mean, like you're done. Like, and the lower you go down in frequency, the more taps you need. And so when you go to like more expensive DSPs, they'll have more taps where you can make more corrections to phase and things of that nature as well. And so while we're talking about mistakes that people make, one mistake is thinking every DSP is the same. So why pay so much more for another one? There are reasons why you should spend more money on better DSPs. And one of the biggest ones for me is going to be how many taps and how many corrections can you make?
Good advice. Really solid advice, especially before you make that purchase. I saw someone just the other day spending, I think, $700 on a entry-level DSP that was like $300 a few weeks ago. So they're big money. So make sure you know what you're getting.
Was that mini DSP?
I think it was a mini DSP product. I don't want to quote which one it was, but it was in the $300 range, and they were being charged $300 or $400 on top of it for certain reasons. So make sure you know what you're getting first.
Yeah, that's it.
I've got more, but I noticed the comments have like suddenly stopped. So I don't know if we're having technical difficulties with comments, if we're not seeing your comments, or maybe we're just that boring. But either way, if you've commented and it's not popping up, something's going on there. Oh, there's one. So maybe I'm wrong.
I don't know. Yeah, there's another guy. Yeah, and you can get over 1,000 taps pretty easily with a good DSP. And part of it also depends on the DSP and how it's set up. Like for example, if you buy a 4x8, sometimes those taps, if it says 1,000 taps, for example, that depending on how many DSP chips are in there is going to depend on how many. If it's actually 1,000 taps total, then that's divided by 8 if you're using all 8 outputs.
Good point.
So, like the Parts Express one, I believe is the same DSP chip, whether it's 4 or 2 outs on their little boards, those little boards. So, if you're doing 4, like a 3-way design or 4-way design with that, you have just as many taps as if you were doing a 2-way design.
Yeah.
We got a super chat from Super Chat. That stayed. What is a good DSP board like the Dayton Audio kernel board, but more powerful taps? That's a really good question because I don't know that I know of one.
A board? I can't answer that question.
Yeah, I mean, I like the mini DSPs. I don't know if any of us have worked with many products. That's the problem. Like, I've generally just worked with the mini DSP products, and they're great. I've never run into limitations with them. I don't know, Nick. Have you?
I have.
Yeah.
I have. Yeah. The Dayton Audio. The easiest thing to do is find out what chip they have. They'll tell you what chip is in them, and the chip will tell you how many taps are in it. So if it says like ADU 1701, well, that's going to be very limited. The higher you go up, the more taps you have. So mini DSP is very good. They have a lot of taps, but they're not a board. Like that's like a complete product. So, Sigma Studios is the one that most people are going to be using for that. So I don't know if they have a list of different manufacturers. Wandom is a very popular brand. That's a Chinese brand. You can take a look at them, but I believe they use all 1701s. So I don't think they use anything bigger than that. Analog Devices, though, is who Sigma Studios is. I would look at them first, Analog Devices, and see what they have.
Go with that then. Yeah.
What other mistakes are we making?
I
Go ahead, Nick.
I do apologize. We don't have more options
Yeah.
than that, but I would definitely tell you to
I
look at the
personally
chip.
just haven't stayed on top of the technology for the past little while.
Well, there's a lot of people doing DSP, but there's a lot of people doing cheap DSP,
Yeah, because people
which is
want it.
kind of the issue.
Yeah.
And yeah, and we were talking with Akustos. Akustos is doing some pretty good ones. But they have built-in amplifiers, and a lot of people don't want the built-in amplifiers. So
Yeah, it's not just a board.
and now you can just use just the outputs if that's what you want. But I would say, for me, I would go mini DSP over
Yeah.
that. But
It'd be a little pricey for just the board.
just if that's what yeah, it doesn't make a lot of sense to
Nick,
me.
did you say
do
you've
that.
run into limitations with mini DSP or with Dayton Audio?
No, with
Oh,
Dayton
okay.
Audio.
Yeah, no, I was saying the mini DSP I've used a lot and never run into limitation with them, but I'm sure you could. You know, I've never really stretched the
Yeah.
legs on those either.
If you do a lot of linear
Yeah, you'll
phasing,
use it up
you
quick.
can get rid of your
Yeah.
taps quick. Yeah, you'll use up quick. But if you want like a flat line, you can typically do that with enough taps on a mini DSP.
Yeah, I think I'd wonder why some like I don't know if that's the best result, like a razor flat frequency response, because
I'm just saying, if you wanted that, you could get
I'm
it.
just saying, I'm just playing the mind game of that. You know, if somebody's doing that, because I've seen it where people will post like they've used all of their DSP to do it, and I just don't forget. As much as we've talked about this on the channel, you got your off-axis responses as well, and what happens vertically, you get these nulls like that. Kind of doesn't go away. That's a physical property of the speaker that you can't DSP out. So you're just moving it.
I think it's a great idea for studio monitors.
Yeah, I mean, there's a good place for it. Sure.
Yeah, a lot of them are built in. They're active for that reason, because in that application it could be crucial. But for general listening, yeah, I don't know that the perfectly ruler flat is necessary.
You're just trading one problem for another, I believe.
Yeah, definitely could be. All right, what if I come out of left? Go ahead.
Oh,
no, I was going to go out of left field, so you go
do it.
first.
I want to hear left field though.
I want to hear left field too. I'm a baseball fan. I want to hear this.
We've talked about this before. The overuse or the misuse or the assumption that passive radiators are going to solve all your problems. You built your speakers. They don't have enough bass. I've seen passive radiators everywhere. Can I just cut a hole in my box and add a passive radiator? This is something that I see on forums. I don't want to say every day, but I'll at least see someone ask about it or mention you should just add passive radiators to this if you're looking for better bass.
Wow, yeah.
Thoughts?
Huh. Well, that person better put it into WinISD first or something to check. I mean, my advice would always be add a subwoofer.
Ideally. Yeah.
Let me tell you what you should do when you go into WinISD. If you're looking at a box, let's just assume you're looking at a woofer or subwoofer or whatever this particular driver is, and you're looking at Parts Express website. The problem with WinISD is that it does not know what to do when you tell it to do a passive radiator. So it'll just make some random box size and everything else. It doesn't make sense. It does great with ported, does great with sealed. Passive radiators has no idea what to do with it. That's fine. Go to Parts Express website or the manufacturer's website, whoever's website it is, look to see what the vented volume is, the recommended vented volume. So if they say 1 cubic foot, after you make it, put all your information in WinISD, throw 1 cubic foot in the box, start there. Now, I'm not saying you have to end there, but start there. Now, obviously, if you already know what your box size is, you're going to throw that in, whatever your box size is. But if you're redesigning a passive radiator in general, you might end up even shrinking the box. You know, I'm not sure. I'm not sure, what this box looks like. So start with that. But yeah, absolutely throw it in WinISD, and don't just throw passive radiators on there. It's just like someone saying, like, just throw a port on a box. You have no idea what it's you don't know what it's doing. I mean, that's what you're basically doing,
Right.
right? Like you could be getting this huge hump, you could be losing
Yep.
base. Like a lot of people don't realize that by porting it and pass rate, like we always say, like it's more efficient in the base region. Well, sort of if you have the right size port and stuff, but if you have the wrong size port, you could be like taking your base that was going like this and go like this.
Now you're rolled off at 100 hertz.
You know, like you're tuning real low, but you have no information after 100 hertz or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Great
stuff's
advice
kinda
on
like
the WinISD.
that stuff's kind of like crossovers. You just gotta investigate it a little bit. There's no easy button. Yeah.
Although anyone that has ever done it will tell you, I did it and it's
Yeah, well,
amazing.
maybe.
No, because we do get, in general, anyone that has built something to a certain degree, you get that feeling of, look what I did, that accomplishment, and things feel better than maybe what reality is. And, I think that's just true with a lot of things and a lot of people
Yeah,
in
people
general.
get the honeymoon effect, right? They just love what they've created, even if it
Mhm.
sounds like crap. They can't hear it, you know. Manny, go sealed. Right on, my man. That's the way to go.
Keeping it simple.
I'm a sealed fanboy. And not because I'm lazy and it's simple. I think it's the best. Can I throw another one out there that isn't so technical?
Hit us.
Yeah.
Impatience. When you DIY a speaker, it takes a long time, especially the build part. I'm building a subwoofer right now and I'm so close to being done, but there's all these little things that are taking up my time. And it's so tempting to rush it and not do a proper job. Or even it'll be fine, but just the little things. Like I think in this day and age, when we watch a 10-minute YouTube video and Nick just goes and he's got a speaker, it's like easy to think it's gonna be that easy for me, right?
It's literally how long it
Yeah,
took too.
10 minutes. Or like my wife will come to me and show me this elaborate project on Pinterest, and it's like 10 easy steps. It's like, no, it's not. You know, and speakers
And
are
easy
like that.
months.
Yeah, 10 easy months. And speakers are like that too. And you just got to be prepared because it's not like going into Best Buy and just bringing up the credit card and walking home with some speakers. It takes a long time, and the reward is worth it, or I wouldn't be doing it. But it's easy to get frustrated. It's easy to go quick and then end up with a product that's like spray painted, or drivers aren't flush mounted, or you bought that pre-built crossover because just not going to learn that right now. So take your time, and if you don't have the time, buy a flat pack or buy a kit or whatever. If there's something you think you're going to struggle with, do the easy button, pay the money, get the flat pack or whatever. But definitely have patience, and I think a lot of newcomers aren't ready for that. Do you agree?
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that. That's not something I would have ever thought of, and I'm so much right there with you. I plan those I segment my builds up in my mind. A speaker box can go together really quickly, the enclosure part, especially if you're doing a simple finish on it. You can have it done in a couple days if you've done it a time or two. I always picture in my mind that I'll solder up my crossover, put it on a board, put my gasketing on my drivers, put my damping material inside, do all these little things, install my terminals. All that's a one-day job or a
Yeah, that
couple
sounds
hour
like
job.
sounds like 20 minutes worth of work. I don't know what you're
it's,
talking about, Cameron.
it's a simple job. And then by like the 3/4 toward the end of the day, I've got my second crossover board done. I'm like, man, I'm not going to make it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm gonna be a little devil's advocate here because I don't necessarily agree.
Wrong.
Yeah, why you shouldn't offset a tweeter? Not you shouldn't offset a tweeter.
Okay,
We
let's
already
hear it.
mentioned this.
Why do you dissent?
I don't necessarily mind people getting things done quickly or whatever. However, once the honeymoon phase is over with, also not being afraid to revisit it.
Okay,
Look at it
sure.
again and be like, you know what? Maybe I could have done something a little bit differently and swap. things out. So for me, I don't necessarily mind that, but also realize that you may end up revisiting it at some point in time later.
Yep.
That's a really good point. I'm gonna fess up to something here. On my latest build, I got lazy.
Sorry, was it wrong?
I got lazy on the crossover board. One of them I did really nice. I used zip ties to go through the board. Much easier if you ever need to change anything. The second one, I was like, you know what? Hot glue is so strong. It's so reliable. It can be if you're not patient with it, it can be a little unreliable. But in most cases, it's a really strong adhesive. So I hot glue my second board together. Big mistake. It's much easier to hot glue your parts onto a board. They don't need to look pretty. It's not going to make them sound any better. But should you, like Nick says, a week after you're done with your build, man, I kind of want to see what that different resistor value sounds like. I've got scars on my hand right now from prying up pieces. Hot glue is strong, I tell you what.
You've got it even better. If you're doing it, let's just assume a two-way for a minute. Buy a dual terminal cup whenever you do
Oh yeah.
a two-way, okay? And buy a bunch of alligator clips.
Yep.
Okay? Don't even put your crossover in the box for the first week or two. It's fine. Keep it out. Just keep the things away from touching each other. Don't short things out, but keep it somewhere. Listen to them like that. And if there's something you're hearing that you don't like anymore, be like, you know what? Let me revisit it and change it out. That way you don't have to do, what Cameron is saying. I have done that a million times. And actually every one of my builds that I do on the channel, I do that consistently because I want to listen to it, and I want to listen to it through a bunch of different stuff that I'm not going to be able to do just right away. So for me, that's what I do. And then when I notice something, I remember one time I was doing the Soundstage 15 and I wasn't measuring it, but I could hear there was something right around 1 kilohertz. And I'm like, I don't know what this is, but I can hear it and I don't like it. And it was just during certain songs. And I changed one value. It was very minimal. Of course, these are high efficiency drivers, so a minimal value has a little greater impact, but very minimal change. And all of a sudden, boom, it came to life. And it was very minimal change, but it made all the difference in the world. And if I had first looked at everything and said, oh, everything looks good on the graph, everything sounds pretty good on 90% of it, I'm good, I would have never realized that. And I would not have been as happy as I was at the end.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And it kind of gets back to that patience thing. If you have the patience, I often will mock up a box just with cheap plywood or MDF. I'll put the drivers in there. I'll use the dual terminal cup, and I'll have a crossover with alligator clips sitting on top, and I'll just play with it, like sometimes for a month or more, and I'll listen to movies through it, songs through it, different type genres of music, and I'll constantly be changing. Now I moved, I don't have it anymore, but I had a giant stack of crossover parts so I could just swap around. If you're new, you maybe don't have those parts and it can be expensive, but if you want a good pair of speakers, take the time to do that, get it right. Otherwise, buy that kit.
Yeah.
And this is also why I highly recommend keeping your board separate. If later you're like, you know what, the woofer sounds really good, but I think I could work on the tweeter a little, and hopefully you don't need to change the exact crossover point per se, then you can make changes to just the tweeter circuit much easier than it was if they were all on one board.
Yep.
Yeah.
Big time.
What do you guys think about simplistic crossovers versus complex? As far as being an issue with beginners, yeah.
Oh, with beginners, yeah, true.
I like to keep it as simple as possible. Unless there's something glaring, I want to keep it as simple as possible. I'll explain why. Through extensive use of DSP and having the Omni mic being able to do live sweeps and being able to look at exactly what I'm hearing as it measures, my perspective has shifted quite a bit in terms of what I can and can't hear and what I find problematic and what I don't. for each person, that may be an individual thing, subjective. But for me personally, yeah, I want to keep it as simple as possible, within reason. Like I say, unless something's glaring that needs attention, that needs a direct sort of notch filter, anything like that, I'm going to try to keep it as simple as possible. Meaning, I want to try to start with second order crossovers as opposed to third order. Try to leave out notch filters and Zobels and things like that until I'm happy with where I'm at, but I could improve a little more because of something in the way. So that's where I land.
Yeah, I'm definitely into simple crossovers, not because I think complex crossovers are a problem. I don't. I'm not one of these purists who think every time we add a component it degrades the sound or something like that. Not at all. And it's not because I'm cheap. I am cheap, but like I'll definitely, if it makes my speaker better, I'll definitely add a $10 capacitor to it. I have found, like Cameron, that my best sounding speakers have always had the simplest crossovers. And again, not because complex crossovers sound worse. I find it's because that's an indication that those drivers are working really well. And it comes out in the final product. The drivers are working well together. They have the right frequency response. They have low distortion, whatever it may be. And all it takes is like 7 or 8 parts and you have a really good sounding speaker. All the speakers I've done with very complex crossovers are usually because I'm trying to mash everything into place. And yeah, they worked, but I was never in love with them.
See, I agree, and I think this is one of the areas where I think if you are a beginner, you should really think about keeping your crossover as simplistic as possible. Because some of the biggest mistakes I see are people see response, for example, to get it ruler flat or look as good as possible,
Yeah.
and not paying attention to impedance for. And next thing you know, impedance is at 2 ohm in a certain part because they've been adding all these parts that don't need to be there, or they're adding parts because they don't know why they're adding them. I've seen people add Zobels and have no idea why they're adding a Zobel. And in fact, the speaker would have really been exactly the same without the Zobel. Like it never needed it. Like they were just parts that you threw on there because you've been told, I need this type of filter, and you've added it. And so for me, I would try, especially if you're a beginner, and these are mistakes I see a lot of beginners make, is adding components that aren't necessary in the beginning as well. Try to keep it simple. And I agree with you. I think most of the best sounding speakers I've run are very simplistic crossovers.
Yeah. If
Yeah.
they work, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I'll second that I'm not really a fan of first order crossovers, or the fact that I'm suggesting the reason I believe simple is better is because more parts in the signal path is a problem per se. I don't really subscribe to. I haven't had that experience yet. So just for those reasons alone. Assorted Rubbish has a.
You can obviously add something.
You're cutting out, Nick. You're gonna have to repeat what you said. You just totally gapped. Okay, moving on.
Now I'm just joking. I said you obviously can. Well, that's part of the issue is you obviously can add something that can become problematic, and you don't know.
Yeah.
You don't realize it because you don't know necessarily what
especially
to look for.
as a beginner. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's an easy mistake to avoid. Just try to keep it simple.
Assorted Rubbish asks, if using 12 dB per octave second order on two-way, does tweeter always need polarity reverse? That's a really good question.
The answer is no.
Could, but not always.
Yeah. And don't forget your crossover is combining with the acoustic slopes of your drivers. So on a woofer with an ascending frequency response, you might end up with like a 6 dB per octave crossover by putting 2 poles on there. And your tweeter is already going to have a 12 dB per octave roll off on the low end. And putting 2 poles on your crossover may end up with a 24 dB per octave crossover. So the answer is no. Commonly, especially if they're on the same plane. But I use a lot of waveguides and stuff, so my tweeter's already backed out. Yeah, the answer is no, but sometimes.
Yeah. So Rodrigo asked,
And this actually, this is a really good point that we should make. Keeping track of your polarity is one that I see a lot of people make a mistake as a beginner. How many times do we see it? I get asked the question a lot too, where people will buy plans and they'll build it and they're like, so, and I'll make a note, make
Yeah,
sure the
yeah,
polarity is reversed on the tweeter. And they're like, are you sure the polarity is supposed to be reversed? It doesn't seem like it should be. And I'm like, I am
yeah.
positive. I am positive it needs to be reversed. But we've seen people that have built even kits and come back and they're like, it doesn't sound right. And we come to find out that what they did is they reverse the polarity. And we say the tweeter because that's what typically we put. Guys, reversing the polarity of either drive, if it's a
Yeah.
two-way, reversing the polarity of either driver does the same thing.
Yep.
Yeah, I've seen measurements in stereo file with an obvious tweeter reverse polarity or woofer. It could be the woofer. Um, it's pretty embarrassing for that company, but yeah, I mean, it happens all the time. It's an easy. I've done it. I've like had my whole thing figured out, and then I forget to flip the polarity, and I'm listening. Like, it's hard to recognize actually because the sound power is still the same. But you're like, what's going on?
Hmm.
And then I'll go back and realize I've totally screwed up and flip that tweeter polarity and be in way better shape. So it happens. Just watch for it.
True. I've also heard, not even within the speaker itself, but at high-end shows, manufacturers in their demo rooms will have inverted polarity between speaker A and B for the whole show. They've gone to take down their setup and they realize their stereo
You
pair was
should be able to
inverted.
notice though.
Right? You think.
Because I mean, it really cancels out frequencies. It should
Right.
be canceling out enough that you should be able to hear that standing between them. You should be like, man, this does not sound right. I was testing an amplifier. I remember I was testing an amplifier and I was like, dude, there's something wrong with this amplifier. I was like, man, this sounds terrible. Like, this is the worst sounding. And then I realized, oh, I flipped the polarity of one of my speakers. And I looked back there and I was like, oh, yep, that's exactly what I did.
We've all
Because I
done
was getting ready to send it back to him and say, look, this one's defective, obviously. And then I looked back there and I was like, oh, but it
Let
was
me
weird
check.
because they had done, usually it's like red, black on the amplifier, like left and right, rights on one side, or positives on one,
Yeah.
and this
yeah.
one was black, red, black. And so it threw me off because it was, I'd never seen in like the two positives in the middle like
Yeah.
that before. Or maybe it was the two negatives in the
Two negatives.
whatever,
I've seen
you know what I'm
that.
saying.
I think
It may have
Crown.
been.
I think Crown may do that if I'm not mistaken. And you can bridge in the back, and the binding posts are right next to each other, and it kind of spooks me every time I have to bridge it.
All right, guys. Next show, we're gonna watch Cameron do bridging the whole show.
No, we're not. Yeah. So assorted rubbish. He's asking again about the polarity thing. I think, and yeah, that comes from a textbook thing where there were assumptions made about the parts you were using, and measuring wasn't as easy, and so they had to make a lot of these assumptions. And so that's where I feel like that's a holdover from a lot of people that have been in this a long time that haven't kept up with modern tech. Those are a lot of the older guys that I see making those types of suggestions.
If your drivers are perfect lines and you apply 12 dB crossovers, you will need to, and they're on the same plane, you will need to flip the polarity.
And it's a Linkwitz
doesn't
Riley.
exist. Yeah.
Linkwitz Riley. We're talking about Linkwitz Riley. And yeah, you're right. And a lot of people read that documentation and see that, but there's a lot of things that go into. This is one of those things where some people say engineering is different than the people that actually do the job at the end. The engineers will say this will work, and the people doing the jobs are like, this won't work. We've done, and I think this is one of those times where like sometimes it's easy to read a textbook and say one thing when in reality there's a little bit more that goes into it than just what you're reading.
What does Rodrigo mean?
I think he means like so me and Tom Zarbo did a project together, and you can tell us, Rodrigo, if I'm wrong. And what we did is we used a physical crossover and part of the build and DSP on the rest of the build.
Oh,
and
yeah,
so
I love
it was
doing that for three-way.
Yeah. Yep. That's exactly what we did. Yes, three-way. Yep.
Yeah, that's a great idea. If that's what he means, if he means mixing slopes, you can do that too. But if you mean a passive crossover for your tweeter and mid and an active crossover between your mid and your woofer, and what
Yep.
also is great about that is you can use EQ in the tweeter band because it covers everything. So yeah, that works really good. I
That's
really like that.
exactly what we did. Oh, I'm sorry. I
Yeah.
thought you were done.
No, I am.
That's exactly. We're just putting each other up. That's exactly what we did. We did a passive crossover between the tweeter and the mid. Made sure it was perfectly in phase, and then DSP'd the heck out of it. And did linear phase on the top end because you can do a lot more linear phase on the top end than you can do on the bottom end. And then did an active crossover and even added, because this one was to a subwoofer, so it's more like a 2.1 almost, a separate knob where you could turn up and down the subwoofer to whatever volume you wanted. It's kind of a really cool little build. It was fun. I like that build.
The other major benefit to that is the crossover in the bottom part of a three-way, typically say it's around 400 hertz between a woofer and a mid, is very expensive passive to do it with passive parts, and it's also difficult. It's also very difficult to measure, and so if you have difficulty measuring it and you're doing it with DSP, your room is going to start to influence that region, and it's okay to use some EQ to fix the room below about 300 or 400 hertz. So all that can be done with your DSP. So it's great. It's a wonderful product.
Yeah, and
This is one of the reasons why I like a Crown XTI amplifier. They're kind of expensive for subwoofers, but I like it because they have a built-in DSP. Now, granted, is it as good as something like a MIDI DSP? No. For a lot of people, it's going to be more than enough for what it is. So I think, I like the Crown XTI. You can also do it with the what's a Behringer, the Behringer DSP. They're like the 6000D or 3000D or whatever, NX 3000D, 6000D. You can use it with those as well. They have nice little ones on there. Of course, if you want to go all out, go mini DSP.
yeah, like Ryan said, it's really hard to measure bass. And so if someone tells me they're tuning their system by ear, if they're telling me they're doing their bass, that's a lot less objectionable than their crossover point between their mid and their tweeter. So like go to town if you want more bass and you're sure your X Max is under control. Bass boosting is going to be a lot less problematic than boosting your higher frequencies. So
Isn't that weird too? Because don't they say it's all about the bass? No treble.
No treble.
Oh, we just lost everyone on the stream.
Whoops. Brian Rollerson says hello. He said he forgot it was Wednesday. I forgot it was today.
Yeah. Well, should we wrap things up there, guys, or what? You got any more?
I think so. Unless anyone has one last thing that they really wanted to talk about. Otherwise, we are good. Is there anything that you guys think that we didn't hit that you really want to talk about?
The only thing on my list was bad measurements. It's very easy for newcomers to try and measure, and they'll put the speaker in the corner of the room and put the microphone out. And they'll use that to design crossovers. There's a whole world around getting measurements right. I'm not going to get into it at this point in the
Well, we
podcast.
did a video kind of on it.
Did we? Oh yeah.
No.
Yeah. I'm that
So just watch. Just go back and watch the video. I have actually I have a if you go to my channel, you can go to anyone's channel, but if you go to my channel, or if you're on any of our channels and click on live, you can go back to the broadcast. It doesn't matter. I did create a list though. I have a playlist. So you can click on Audio Digest playlist and you can watch all of them.
Yeah. And my channel, a lot of my videos are all about like testing drivers, and I walk through the measurement process. So just even watching what I'm doing and me kind of talking about why will probably give some insight on how to do that properly.
Absolutely. All right, I think that's a good one. Yeah, definitely sub to Impulse Audio and DIY Hi-Fi. And if you're not subscribed to me, subscribe to me too. All right, guys. So let's wrap this up. At the end of the video, we always talk about what we have coming on our channel, and I'm really interested to hear if Impulse Audio has anything coming up on his channel. Do you have anything?
Yes, I do. I mentioned it earlier in the stream. I have a subwoofer box that is pretty much built. I'm just putting the finishing touches on it, and it's going to be up in my theater room this weekend for sure, and maybe the video ready before our next stream, but that might be pushing it. So yeah, very soon.
Can I ask a question? Can I ask a question?
Everything's
All right.
top secret.
I'm trying.
Yeah, of course.
All right. I'm trying not to spoil anything, but are we doing Speak On or are we doing
You know what?
Binding
No,
Post?
because I have Speak On to Banana cables already, and my amplifier is Speak On, so I just put Banana on the subwoofer. And I figure if I ever like repurpose it, more people have Banana connectors. So yeah, that's kind of a
making a Speak On connector cable.
yeah,
really
I know,
hard.
but I just have them. So yeah.
No, I understand. I was just curious. I'm a little sad now. I don't know much about you anymore.
Wow.
How about you, man?
Well, none of my builds have ever used a Speak On connector, though I am envious of the simplicity of them. I use bare wire and binding post too often. I've got a big home theater build that I'm just mentioning for the first time ever coming out. That should be out sometime. Give it a week or so. The build is done. I'm wrapping up the edit, so look forward to that. I'm really happy with how they sound. Hope you guys like the video. So excited for you guys to see it.
He did share a picture with us, and they are beautiful.
Thank you.
They look good, don't they, Ryan?
Oh yeah.
They look really nice. I have a couple videos. I got a couple videos coming out. I have one on that $250 projector coming out, which is kind of interesting. I think I'm going to go ahead and try to get a video out on the new Omni mic if I can. And I do have a video coming out also on these. I'm trying to wrap this video out soon. These are the new Fosse headphones. I got to be honest, like they're not cheap, right? I'm not going to say they're cheap because they're not, but they're very good quality. They are magnetic planar headphones, and they are open back. I will say this. They're the first headphones that I really, really like. I'm not a big, like, I don't know if you guys are big headphone fans, but I think headphones are, they'll compromise a lot of the time. But I really like these. There's a lot that I really like about them. I don't want to give away the whole review or anything, but if you are looking for some headphones, I think there's a lot to like about these.
Cool. I'm excited.
What do you say?
They're just expensive? Because you seemed apprehensive.
No, I'm not. I'm trying not to give away a lot. I really like them. They're about $400, I think, on Kickstarter. I think they'll be like $500 not on Kickstarter. No, they're cool. I mean, they're great. I've always liked this. I don't know about you guys, but I always like that you can remove these if you ever need to replace the wire. You can, especially having kids and now cats. I get a little concerned that something might happen to the wire, and you can actually replace those pretty easily. The only thing is they're not Bluetooth. So if you're like a big like wireless fan, they're not going to be for you. And they're open back, so they're not for the office either. Because you wear them in the office, everyone's going to hear everything that you're listening to.
Yeah, and vice versa.
Yeah, and if you have a lot of kids or a loud environment, I mean, there's reasons why you don't buy anything, right? Like there's always reasons why you wouldn't buy them. And for some people, there are going to be reasons why they won't buy those, and that's fine. But this is my first experience with open back headphones, and they do say that they give a wider soundstage and help you feel like you're there. And I did find that to be a much more accurate assessment than versus these, which are also planar headphones, but those sound significantly better. And with headphones, I always find, unfortunately, with at least one or two, I find them typically to have some type of frequency boost or dip that is really too much. You know what I mean? I'm like, I just don't really. Those I haven't found that yet. I'm not saying they're not there, but I haven't personally found that.
Cool.
Radio.
All right, guys. Well, I hope you all have a good night. We will not be on next week. Next week, I'm going to be busy, and Impulse Audio and Cameron and Ryan both said they didn't want to spend time with you guys, so we're going to take the week off.
No. All right.
Well,
Thank you, guys.